Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Kitchens, Executive Publisher at TechTarget. Last month, we shared a video on how we were responding with our content creation and audience engagement in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, I'd like to shift focus a little bit and share some learnings we have seen on audience research behavior and how they're responding to marketing and call outreach, thinking that this might be helpful for many of you as you work on your own strategies for your technology businesses. Now, before we talk too much about what's changing and how we can adapt, we always have to look back and see where we came from. So remember, it wasn't that long ago that buyers were finalizing their 2020 IT priorities. Buyers were telling us that this was going to be the year of heightened digital transformation spending. They were going to be investing in key technologies like cloud and automation and AI and machine learning and security and monitoring and all the things that were going to allow them to take their business to the next level of digitization to increase customer experience and ultimately the enablement of productivity for their employees. And then, of course, the world was faced with some new challenges. And in light of pandemic response, they had to really think about workforce productivity, as they might have gone 5% of their workforce working from home to 100% of their working from home in a matter of days. They had to think about the fluctuation or the transition of their customers, while they were also having to maintain higher levels of customer service than ever before. Now, during this time, we certainly did see a shift in our audience behavior. I mean, obviously, TechTarget's business is to develop content that really is optimized for inbound organic search, so we can really quickly see what buyers are engaging with and how traffic patterns might indicate where their level of interest is across technologies. So at first, we definitely did see an adjustment. The weeks of March 9th and then the weeks of March 16th did bring a decline of overall traffic to the TechTarget network. These were the weeks that were first being issued for work from home orders, and buyers were really trying to focus on very short-term immediate imperatives. But now, and especially as we headed into April, we are definitely seeing this level of adjustment where the overall traffic levels have returned and then increased in the TechTarget network. I think this really indicates to all of us that buyers are adjusting to the new norm, and they are going back to sort of the research that they need to do to make buying decisions. We also thought it was pretty interesting that our data reflects the new norm when it comes down to the timeline of research, where more of research was happening on the weekends than ever before. This actually, in turn, had TechTarget's marketing team create more email newsletters over the weekend that have seen great engagement as buyers are adjusting to a new timeline of work that might happen throughout the week. Now, when it comes down to what buyers are looking at, we definitely saw immediate attention go to those common technology imperatives that every business had to quickly adjust. We bucketed it into 4 categories, and no surprise, the first category is productivity. Everyone had to make sure that their video conferencing systems were up to the task of supporting a new remote workforce, that collaboration software was in place, unified communications was being rolled out across call centers to make sure that teams that were on the front lines with customer service and support could continue with a high level of service, and anything that was really tied to HR or even patient engagement in certain industries was really enabled. Now, speaking of enabling technologies, that might all help on the front end, but on the back end, there are certain technologies that are needed in order to make those other things happen. So if you have all of this remote workforce, you need to make sure that your network can sustain it and that you have the right security and access controls in place to make sure you're being very careful of breaches. At the same time, on the customer and the application side, we definitely saw an increase in technologies like low code, no code. So developers could make fast changes to applications without having to completely rewrite source code, or API management because they might be using new types of cloud services in ways they weren't before. Now, when it comes to cloud and things like remote work, we know that we have to make sure that things are working properly. And a number of technologies were getting more look that was tied to the optimization of these technologies. So a lot of attention was going to security response and identity and access management tracking. But then we also created a new category here at TechTarget tied to end user experience monitoring. That was a much more broader end-to-end look at everything from the application being developed, delivered, and then the experience the end user might have with that application, whether they're an employee or a customer. And finally, disaster recovery has always been a very important topic among the enterprise B2B tech audience that TechTarget serves. But in the last 2 months, we've certainly seen even a heightened interest in that as buyers try to navigate not only through the current landscape, but future-proofing their business for anything that might come down the line. So what you're looking at here are the highest growth topics where traffic jumped anywhere from 50 to 200% from pre-pandemic levels, really indicating the short-term interest needs of our technology buying audience. At the same time, we have also seen this return to normal a little bit with the overall traffic engagement when we start thinking about the topics and the segments that our buyers are most attracted to. So at TechTarget, we have a taxonomy that is about 10,000 topics and terms. And of course, that's too unwieldy for any of us to actually use. So we roll those technology terms up into what we call segments. And what I'm showing you here are the top 10 segments of technology that are getting the most traffic on our network today. And what we still see today is that 75% of our traffic is still coming from topics and segments that really don't have a direct correlation to COVID-19. They're things like software development and network infrastructure and analytics and systems management. And ultimately, these are the things that really mattered to the enterprise buying audience before the current landscape as they were thinking about digital transformation. And I think if we could characterize anything, it's really showing that the pandemic has just made digital transformation even more critical than ever before. And this is reflected in the research behavior we're seeing among our buying audience. Now, we'll shift gears a little bit from the overall traffic and the engagement we're seeing as buyers are sort of proactively coming to TechTarget to do their independent research to now how it's looking when we try to engage with them through our own email efforts. We have email efforts both for editorial content as a member engagement exercise, but also because we operate the largest direct marketing platform in B2B tech as we deliver content syndication and lead gen services for many of you as the technology vendor community. So when we look at the marketing response among our buying audience, it really reinforces to us that technology continues to be a critical tool for our global economy. So while there has been industry discussions about use of coronavirus or COVID-19 topics in email marketing to be a challenge for other industries, what we've seen on the flip side is that when properly addressed, the COVID-19 topic can perform very well for technologies that enable solutions for the buying audience. And what you're seeing here is that performance can go as high as 40% over the benchmark for that topic when written properly. So the takeaways we would have for B2B tech marketers is that if your technology is contextually relevant, it's a really important time for you to be direct and vocal about it. Now, of course, we want to continue to have the proper tone and steer clear of any exploitation that you might make of the situation. That's not good for any brand. But right now, buyers are looking for good advice. They need help from their technology partners. So if you can prioritize the relevance of your business with the current landscape, you are going to see good attention and traction. On the flip side, we don't think that means every marketing message needs to be directly related to COVID-19. And in fact, we've seen increased performance shifts across all of our topics. And that really indicates to us that there isn't a seismic shift that is happening. The things that were important to the buying audience, relatively speaking, are still important today. And when I look at the data, we can really see that almost 70% of all of the topics that TechTarget serves on has seen increases in click-through rate and email responsive rates since before the pandemic timeframe. And there's been some notable performance increase in key technologies like IAM, obviously high from a security perspective, but BI analytics and network infrastructure and management and monitoring, and again with software development. So these are areas that buyers are continuing to engage with now even more than they did before. Now, many of you may know that we also have a service at TechTarget where we confirm projects. So if we see users researching on our network, we'll call into the account, confirm the project they're working on, and get key data like what their project requirement is and the vendor that they are considering. And we do that through a series of callers. So we have callers reaching out to target buying audiences, as many of you might on your sales development, your SDR efforts. And what we can say is despite the change in the landscape and many of the work from home requirements, we have been able to actually increase our call connect rates, especially in US and mainland Europe. In fact, when we've been calling, we've been able to get administrators and receptionists to forward lines over or give us the direct phone line of the person we're trying to reach. And when we do make the connection, our callers are reporting that the calls are more valuable. There's a human connection that you can make, and these discussions are more meaningful as we continue to try to help buyers get the information they need to navigate this landscape. Now, of course, we have to think about the marketing behavior that we might see for our audience and ultimately how that translates into sales and revenue for all of you. So again, if I look at that confirmed project data, it tells us some interesting things that might be changing a little bit as we think about sales pipeline acceleration as you move towards revenue. Well, first, so in addition to us confirming projects, we also go in and audit them and try to reconfirm them after a period of time to make sure those projects are still viable. We've been doing that for years. When I look at the reconfirmation rate for most recent deals compared to what we were able to do, say, in Q4 of last year, we're only reconfirming about 5% less. That's really encouraging for all of us, knowing all of the markets that TechTarget serves, that deals are still happening. But what's really telling is when we actually look at the difference in the project requirements the buyers are telling us they're using to evaluate the vendors they're going to select. When we looked at that data in Q4 of 2019, you can see here, these are the top project requirements. A lot of it's tied to upgrade cycles, replacing hardware, improving efficiency, all of the things that, again, are going to be tied to that overall digital transformation effort that so many businesses were going through as they entered 2020. Now, today, when we look at the projects we confirmed in March and April, you can see a very clear shift in the project requirements that buyers are saying they're going to use to prioritize the vendors that they're choosing. So regardless of the technology, we're seeing an increase in projects that have to contribute improved employee productivity or access to good documentation and data that they might have. We saw a big increase in IT automation and resiliency of infrastructure and a decrease in just sort of hardware replacement that could potentially be deprioritized right now. So these are things that are very important for all of you as sales and marketers to really understand the mind frame of the buying audience as you approach those deals. And as you're thinking about that, let's also think about the landscape you might be selling into. And we are seeing a more competitive landscape, which is hard to believe because it was a pretty competitive landscape before. And when we look at that and we actually look at the number of vendors that buyers are telling us that they are considering, we've seen a huge increase in the number of projects that are just telling us they're considering one vendor. And that tells us that the buying journey has changed and buyers are doing research earlier in the process. They're gathering all the project requirements, they're talking to vendors, and they're making their short list almost before they might have the project confirmed. That really does make us, as sales and marketers, have to think differently about the way we approach our audience base, marketing to them earlier in the process, and making sure we're continuing to partner with them throughout the journey and providing useful information to make sure that you are on the short list by the time they get that project confirmed. Now, if we could give you some final advice here, it's really thinking about how you can continue to align your solution with key areas of business resiliency and those underlying enabling digital technologies that we know are so important to our buying audience. So I'd characterize the business resiliency in 3 buckets. First, everyone's looking for that secure remote access and making sure that they continue to support the employee dynamic that they're facing. But they're also really focused on customers, heightened CX, heightened e-commerce, and also making sure that the digital experience of their organization is higher now than ever before. And ultimately, the supply chain is so critical. They have to think about everything from product development to product fulfillment to ultimate customer delivery and support in a much broader way. And they have to think about how they can automate that throughout the process, including communication and logistics across so many moving parts, and really leveraging predictive modeling to make sure that they're prepared for all the changes that are ahead. So for many of you, you have been focusing on how you can enable digital technologies for the last few years. So now is an even more critical time for you to think about how do you relate to the things that drive these business resiliency core tenets. So the first would be anything that enables the network. Right now, making sure that network enablement and acceleration is so critical. So whether it be across supporting that remote workforce or supporting the e-commerce and the customer experience dynamic that businesses are trying to bring to bear, we have to make sure that the application performance is strong enough. So that not only means technologies like APM, but also making sure that the infrastructure behind the application is able to support the new capabilities and the new requirements that we have from a business demand. Second is cloud computing, knowing that cloud computing has continued to define the ability for digital engagement, and the software-defined approach to hardware across compute and capacity has been so key. This is really where capacity and workload management comes to play, and ultimately making sure that our infrastructure is optimized properly. So new management and monitoring tools to make sure that they can do that, especially across hybrid clouds. And ultimately the back-end support and service through things like help desk technologies and support and remediation is able to be in line with the new requirements of the workload. And finally, we're doing these things at faster speed. We're often doing it without the people and processes in place that were needing to be before. So making sure that analytics and automation are really top of mind for the solutions that you bring to bear. Thinking about how big data and modeling and how you can automate certain processes that used to need human intervention before, and ultimately how you can detect changes or anomalies that might be brought to bear in the data, and ultimately making sure that data is protected and backed up, are going to be of highest interest to our buying audience across the board. So now with all of these changes in the project requirements and making sure that you continue to align, the last thing that we've been tracking is that there has been some shift in the actual firmographics of the audience that would suggest a new approach to persona targeting. So what I mean by that is we have seen a shift in the demographics of our audience. You know, no surprise, there has been a decline in research from small businesses who have potentially been hit the hardest and had to make some tough choices in the short term. But on the flip side, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of research coming from the largest organizations across the globe, with almost a 23% higher research rate from companies over 1,000 employees. What's been most surprising for us is looking at the audience traction coming in from these industries. So where normally you think about persona targeting and potentially worry that certain industries that have been really hit hard might not be great sales targets for you, what our data is suggesting is that industries like retail or manufacturing goods or even travel and hospitality are really important industries right now for technology. Because these industries have been hit so hard, they are relying even more on the productivity of their workers as well as the digital experience they have with their customers to make sure that they can navigate through this. So what we would talk to customers about is really rethinking your personas. You know, knowing that this is a changing landscape, you really have to think about being more flexible with your routes to market. Think about new entry points. Approach ABM in a new way. Make it less about account list targeting of what you might have previously thought about, and instead use behavior and self-identification of the audience to be that marker to really address who you should go after, and use the data that you might have in terms of intelligent account engagement and enabling your sellers to really take advantage of this data to ultimately yield greater response. Now, for any of you who are customers and you might be using our Priority Engine platform, you know that we're able to show you this data and many of the data points that I'm aggregating here for you in real time to actually help your sales and marketing actions be targeted against that behavior. I thought this one was a great example. I mean, again, knowing that the travel industry has been hit the way it's hit, I looked at Southwest Airlines, who's been actually trying to focus right now on making sure that they're shifting their customer loyalty programs from a previous environment that would expire at a certain date to now be more long-term loyalty programs. So knowing that their technology team has had to adapt to this quickly, we look internally and see the buying behavior that's happening with our audience and the buying team within Southwest Airline, and knowing they're reflective of that customer experience technologies as they're researching different data platforms and really trying to understand how they can segment their customers and better respond to the current landscape. And on the flip side, they're also doing a lot of research around BI and analytics, making sure they can approach customer segmentation in a proper way and provide resources to their organization in order to move forward. So being able to really embrace the different behavior from an organization that it might be going through a crisis, but figuring out how you can be responsive to the different needs of their buying team is really going to ultimately help you position your products and services most appropriately. So hopefully this information has been helpful. We're trying to offer some tips to navigate and maximize success as you go to market. I'll leave you with bringing back a quote from Kelly Demore, our Chief Content Officer. I shared this in my last video, where she was really just encouraging vendors to continue to be helpful to your audience base. This visual is sort of a great representation of that. As people, sometimes we say, how can we help? As opposed to just showing up at a neighbor's lawn and with a lawnmower and mowing their lawn and just being helpful. It's that sentiment that we continue to suggest all of you take as you navigate customer dynamics. And when you think about, how do you approach and how do you prioritize, focus on the accounts that are showing interest. All of the data I showed earlier is really representing the fact that right now there are a lot of buying activity and buying signals in all of the markets that we serve. So really prioritize the accounts that are doing that research is going to help you do more with less in this environment. And ultimately, buyers have clear needs. And if you are able to take the content that you have within your arsenal and adjust it and make sure it's relevant to the current situation, and as well as positioning your products most appropriately, buyers are going to look to you as a trusted resource. But remember that these journeys are changing and their timelines are changing and their needs are changing. So you really want to think about how you stay consistent. And from a sales and marketing perspective, trying to get in earlier in the process, as well as being useful throughout the journey, is going to be more critical. And we know that while deal competition is more intense, that sales is going to need more angles. So the more from a marketing perspective you can partner with your sales counterparts and together figure out how you can look at what buyer behavior is telling you and how you can be responsive is really going to help you win in the long run. So I hope this data has been helpful for you. Here at TechTarget, we continue to remain focused on how we can enable your success. We're going to continue to do that through our content engine, really making sure we can identify market buyers who are in market, and a solution portfolio that's really here to help you navigate these challenges and ultimately pull you through on the other side. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to being in touch, and I hope you all stay safe.